Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. Long overdue for a return visit, Marc Megna. It's great to have you on. And for anybody who's not overly familiar with you, well, you're the co-founder and co-owner of the Anatomy Gyms in Miami. Very successful chain of gyms. It's really cool to see you doing well there. You are a certified strength and conditioning coach, an author. I've read your book, but here's a cool part. Former New England Patriot. So you spent some time in the NFL and you spent some years in our CFL up here in Canada playing for the Montreal Alouettes, if I recall correctly. So welcome back.
Oh, it's good to be back. Thank you for having me. It's always good chatting, catching up, and people say it's an honor, but it's fun to be here. We haven't talked in some time, but I know you're doing great things within the space in the industry, so it's great to catch up.
Well, one of my favorite parts is to share my friends, the people I respect, look up to, I think are doing incredible things with the audience that's here. So one of my favorite things, I have to preface this a little bit. Again, you have a young family. You are, again, the owner of this growing and successful chain of gyms. And something I always see on your media, there's hard training. You're always sweating hard. The conditioning is a non-negotiable thing. And I think a lot of people, especially entrepreneurial business, young families, it's so easy to say, well, there's no time left for the fitness side of stuff. What's the identity or maybe belief system underlying your unwillingness to compromise on the fitness side?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. I've been doing it so long. I was talking to a gentleman today. He came in and he wanted to, I said, when would you like to train? And he said, man, I have to train in the morning. I would never train in the evening. And I said, I hear you. I've done both in my life, but my thing usually is the morning. And then when I look back and I think about it, I've been training in the morning. I mean, since I've been probably 13 years old. I'm 49. So it's a part of my DNA and my routine and my habits, my consistency. And I think obviously with training, we all know how it makes you feel. I get that nice dopamine hit and I'm ready for the day. It's all the reasons that we know, Andrew. It just helps me so much. And now it's even more important. I have an amazing wife and amazing son, and I want to be around to spend time with them. So the selfish part is it's my time and I get to push myself. And the substantial or important part is it helps me keep me in the race where I can better myself or continue to maintain or better myself to spend time with them. But it's also like I enjoy pushing myself. Like I really enjoy knowing that, okay, that was hard. And there was a spot in the middle where I went to negative town and I pulled out of it. That's an important part of it as well.
I suppose it's hard to compare the hard now versus the hard. If anybody wants to go read your book, the hard that you put in to, making an NFL roster, that's some hard.
Yeah.
Can you still go there? Can you still go there and tap into that version of you?
I don't know. Of course, my ego wants to say yes, but that was a very unique human being. I talked about this a bit recently, and it's a necessary mindset to have. It's just not a good long-term plan for multiple reasons. But yeah, it's there's a bit of a serious focus that happens there, and it's there's no negotiating out of exercises or reps or movements. It's just let's do it. And I think that's a big part of what we do in everyday life. It's a part of what you do, and you have to say, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm going to do it. And you just don't allow anything to invade your mind. And we talk about athletes and training. The best athletes yes, they're big, they're fast, they're strong, but that's not what makes them great. You've heard it a million times, but the best athletes are the best compensators, right? Well, I think the people who are most productive are the people who are not productive, but get the things done that they want to get done. That's better said. That they don't allow this talk to invade their mind. And I think that it's a journey to try to refine that and get better at that as we age.
Do you think, have you ever had a day where you said, hey, I don't want to do this, but then thought, this is nothing compared to, again, the things that I did in the past. This is a layup. Has that ever been present?
It's every day. That's every day. Like I just think we have this coach. I had this coach in college named Jim Reed. I actually had him on my podcast a few years ago, and he coached for 40 plus years. And he produced not only from a small 1AA school. I remember we put like in 2 years, like 12 guys in the NFL that played in the NFL. And he also produced doctors, lawyers, people who are, CEOs of pharmaceutical companies, the general manager of a professional football team, multiple NFL scouts. And we all say the same thing when things get hard with our family or training, workouts, whatever gets hard in life. Hey, man, I played for Jim Reed. I can do anything. Like we say that a lot.
We also kind of know that this old school type of coach, which is not what I'm assuming here, that would put players through hellish practice, does not actually produce great people. I mean, that's more of a survivorship bias. There's a famous thing, I can't remember the guy's name, but you go back and the guy took a team out in the Texas heat for a couple of weeks, and there's sort of a myth around how great this guy was, but really just the people who hung on were the ones that had no choice. And it was more of a survivorship bias thing. So what qualities really made this coach produce great people? Because he'd make you guys work hard, but what inspired you guys to work hard for him?
That's a wonderful question. There's a lot in there for the answer, but I remember one time I was in the locker room, and this wasn't the entire locker room, but it might have been 80% of the team. We were talking about our backgrounds and our families and our parents. And 8 of the 10 athletes in the locker room came from single parent homes, or specifically single mom homes. So they didn't have a father, right? He was the father figure, and he was extremely hard on us, but he really cared about us. I know you've heard this before, Andrew, but it never would have worked if we didn't know he cared about us. The reason that we would suck it up and push and want to be better and take, sometimes some verbal tongue lashings is that we know he cared about us. And that was the most important thing. But if you were not running to the ball in practice and he screamed at you, by the way, he never really, he yelled a little bit, but not a lot. It was the defense coordinator and the offense coordinator. They're the ones who did the yelling. It doesn't work if you don't want to be better. Like you have to say, you know what? I was reading something this morning that if it's always someone else's fault, it's a non-starter. It's just not going to work. Like, hey man, you did this wrong. You need to get better. Well, what about these guys? It's like, that's like, we already have a problem with that type of person who's in the room, right? So if you get called out and someone's trying to hold you accountable and you say, you know what, I'm watching the video and it doesn't look good and I'm not running to the ball, or at the very least, Andrew, I'm not running full speed and I could do better. I think that's the person who ends up being a player, a starter, a lead captain, a leader, an all conference player, and the person who believes that I can do better. And more specifically, I'm going to do better and becomes a practitioner. That's the person that's like, wow, I saw that guy last week and I look at him this week. Like that's an important thing. That's a big thing that a lot of people will watch the podcast and get the rules and get the template, but they don't do anything. That's where the rubber meets the road.
This episode is brought to you by VersaGrips. After my first workout with VersaGrips, I swore I'll never lift without them again. VersaGrips is the premier lifting grip brand, and because my friend Nick Shaw, the co-founder of RP Strength, raves about them, I finally got a pair. I love them. If you're worried that using VersaGrips will interfere with developing grip strength, it won't, and it's silly to limit how much you can lift and how close you can train target muscles like hamstrings or lats to failure because your grip is the limiting factor. I often get asked by my female clients, and I've been recommending VersaGrips long before they became a sponsor. My clients love them. Regular straps suck. They're always too thick or too short. They're annoying to use. Personally, I've never found them effective. Maybe it's just me. VersaGrips are night and day better. They even form a protective layer between your delicate hands and the toughest barbell knurling, so they replace gloves too. VersaGrips are designed with premium non-slip materials, so you never have to worry about your grip slipping. You can just focus on lifting weight. I'll give you 2 options to grab your pair today. You can check out www.versagrips.com/Andrew Coates, which will automatically apply your discount, or visit the VersaGrips store on Amazon. Use the option that gets you the better deal, easier shipping, but shoot me a message, let me know you grabbed a pair. There's something big here. And I see this across fitness, social media a lot. It's the person who self-selects to the message or the messenger. And it's a false dichotomy and oversimplification, but I generally see people as low agency or high agency, right? Victim mindset or, very empowered. And there are talking heads, there are figures or gurus, people who, our fitness industry is easy to enter. And I'm grateful for it because it allowed me to get in here. But there are people whose agendas, they will say virtuous, the right things, but they also consistently platform messaging about why it's almost insurmountable, whether it's statistics. Again, statistics are a bell curve, there are averages. And what do we know about the average American? 88% of people are metabolically unhealthy, right? That's a statistic that came out of a study a couple of years ago. There are a lot of socioeconomic reasons why someone cannot, the odds are stacked against them. And there are talking heads in our space that present these things as though there's actually almost no hope, even though they will find a clever way to be virtuous. But there's finding the people, it's the person who self-selected that message to say, well, there's no point. It's all beyond my control. Now, of course, that same talking head is saying, well, I am uniquely virtuous. The rest of the fitness industry is bad. That's a red flag right there if you ever encounter it. But I think the key here is it still starts with you, the person. And I think the person listening to this podcast is going to self-select as someone who's empowered, is not afflicted with a victim mindset. But if you ever have that instinct within your soul about any aspect of life, really challenge the narrative behind that. That's my whole thing.
Mm, mm. Yeah. So, Chase Hughes?
I don't.
Chase Hughes is a former government neuro science / behavior, control like the torture room, understands attitudes and everything, right? Behavior, heavy on behavior. He said that if you've ever been a young person and your apartment is completely a mess, and then you put on a suit and you go to an event and you're trying to posture as you are someone special and you really have your act together, there's a reason it doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is because you may have a nice suit, you may be a good looking person, but you have to have it together when no one's looking. And if you have it together when no one's looking, and then you show up and you're in the nice suit, you have this energy, your energy kind of precedes you. The energy kind of, shows the room who you are. But if you don't have paid, your bills aren't paid, you're in debt, your dishes aren't washed, your apartment's a mess, all your relationships are in shambles, and then you show up in a nice suit. I appreciate the effort, but it's really the most important thing is your behavior, your attitude, and your systems when no one's watching. So I take this over to the fitness industry. I've been to events where we had a big conversation with this recently. I've been to events where they asked me to speak. I'm like, man, this is great. I'm showing up. I'm on a group of wonderful fitness professionals. I'm going to learn a lot. It's an honor to be here. I show up the day to speak. 10 of the 12 speakers are late. They were out drinking the night before. Now they're going to get on stage and talk about the rules to succeed in their life story. And I'm thinking this is a complete facade. And I think it's like I'm not suggesting you, and there are a lot of wonderful people on social media, but I also know the ones who aren't. They don't walk the walk and live it. And I think that's a big problem. I think you have a podcast, I have a podcast. It's fun to be on here. I think there's a group of people who benefit greatly from these conversations, right? It could just switch, right? But I think there's a large group of people who need to stop listening to podcasts. They need to stop listening to podcasts and like go do something and have a year of like solid, consistent effort, work, and foundational pillars to get their life going. And it's I speak from a completely mediocre position of content, but if I'm being frank, I'm doing these things every day. You're not going to see it in the content. I don't know what else to say. Does that make sense?
It does. And that's what I pulled from your media. And your metaphor, well, your literal example of the person putting on the suit, it's a metaphor for social media, for how people will put on the polish and the things they'll say and the way they show up on social media. It's often a facade. I mean, I think this is also kind of cliche and low hanging fruit. We kind of know that the industry has a lot of this, but does the person showing up polished actually execute on the things, as you said, when no one is looking? And I mean, what's the definition of integrity, right? Doing the right thing when no one is looking.
Mhm.
And boy, it sure makes it easy to do the right thing when people are watching. And try to remember, oh, yes. This story popped up recently, and I think I messaged you about it. I tagged you, posted it. And I'm sure it was Jordan Shallow retelling this story. So I'm assuming I have it right. I want you to get the right version. But after your time in the NFL, CFL, you kind of started over and you were just a personal trainer on the gym floor. And I mean, shit, I'm still a full-time trainer, but I remember the days of early in my career where you're just that trainer on the floor, right? It's a noble thing, but it's humble beginnings. And I think it was early in the morning and you picked up a protein bar, an empty wrapper off the floor. And I don't think you knew it at the time, but a guy was on cardio equipment and watched and saw you do that. And that guy became your co-founder for your anatomy gyms years later because he saw an act when you had no expectation anybody was looking. You did the smallest thing in the moment that was the right thing. Is that exactly the story?
Uh, I mean, more or less that. So I have this clean habit. It's funny because I met someone recently who was speaking about this, and I'm thinking this person is exactly like me with this behavior. I pick things up off the floor, like super small things, and you call it a disorder, you call it whatever you want, you call it OCD, whatever label that's out there. But to me, like, I have always been like an orderly person. That just, it is what it is. And I pick things up off the floor. Listen, there's a lot of people who do that. There's a lot of people who make fun of me for doing it. But if I'm being honest, it's not something that I've been able to control in my life. It's just like I look at it as I'm going to use something that could be viewed negatively in a positive way to keep the floor orderly. And I was doing that during my early days of training. And there was a gentleman who was on the stair stepper in that moment, and I picked up something very small, a white piece of like, I don't know if it was lint or piece of paper off the floor, and I put it in my pocket. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing a floor run. I'm just cleaning the floor." And he said, "Why? You don't own this place?" I said, "No, I don't, but I work here, and I feel good about being on this team, and I just want to do my part, and I actually enjoy it." And he literally said, "Maybe we'll work together someday." But he was our um, he's our primary investor in the brand, and he's been huge for us. But I believe that you don't invest in ideas so much as you invest in people, and I think that that's an important part of it. I believe that. That's just my opinion. The people that are going to be in the day to day, he saw something, and I know that was small, but he had been watching me for, months
Mm,
probably, and then he finally said something.
There's a whole lot more to it. But again, it's that consistent doing the right thing when no one is looking. You'd be surprised who's
Yeah.
watching, and you add up enough of that, and it shows character.
Well, let me tell you this, Andrew. Like, if our gym, we have a lot of members, and if our gym, one of our locations is packed, and I'm out there picking up the floor, they're like, "Why is he doing that? He's one of the owners." And it's like, one would say, well, he's doing that because it's a good show because there's people there. Or I would tell them, or I'm doing it because the gym's packed and we need extra hands on deck to clean the floor. Like, if you're a trainer, you understand that. If you walk the walk and live the life, you understand that. The people who think it's a show can't understand why you would do such a thing. More specifically, when you have a team that should be doing it. Any person who's been on a team understands that you cannot ask people to do things if you don't do it yourself. Or you can, and they just won't respect you. That's just something I believe.
Going back to your dedication. So again, this comes from, I see your Instagram stories. You're always on your rower, right? Always. I mean, that's snippets. I'm seeing piece of the day, right? But does that dedication to your strength, your conditioning, make you a better business operator? And does it make you a better father and husband?
Well, the business side, like, I have business partners and we're all responsible for an important piece of the business. We all do our thing. I think me understanding, or I think maybe the discipline and the consistency helps me. And, people, I've heard the statement as you have, being good at one thing makes you better at another. I used to believe that. I don't necessarily believe that anymore because I'm a very physical human, and I believe I've been an athlete my majority of my life. That doesn't make me good at business, but it does make me understand that effort, hard work, consistency is a part of business. And I think it puts me on alert and makes me, hyper aware of some things. It helps keep my mind healthy. So that can make you better as a thinker, on a team or for a business. But in regards to my family, um, I think I learned a long time ago that I want to be a great father. And I learned a long time ago that your children aren't going to do what you say; they're going to do what you do. Like, they're really going to do what you do, good or bad, right? If you're a drinker, it's probable your kids are going to be drinkers. If you're on your phone 24/7, that kid's going to, listen, there was a point where I was running around on my phone so much that my son had this little piece of, it's called Magatile, where he thought it was a phone. So now when I put my phone away, he puts his phone away. It's a fake phone. He puts his phone away. So, um, I also believe it's easy to spot a disciplined person. So if I'm staring at someone and this person is, um, very intentional about what they do, they're very consistent about what they do. They're they it's important to them to look put together, what they wear, how they wear it, if they show up on time. Like, all those things are training, right? Because if you do one set, then you talk for 15 minutes, then you do another set, what do you get out of that? You may get something, but you're not going to get, so I think there's carryover there.
All right. I pulled some quotes from your media, some stuff that you shared in your story, and I like this stuff. So this alludes to something you said earlier, quote, you don't need more motivation. You need a plan, more follow through, and to stop watching 2-hour podcasts about grind culture.
Yeah, speaking about what we do. Like, I think podcast. Like, I'm very serious. I do think podcasts are great, and I'm not trying to push my own narrative or story, but I'm so tired of listening to people say, I'm grinding. I'm grinding. Like, it's not to say that you need to wake up at 4 a.m. to be a grinder. You can wake up at 9 a.m. and be a grinder, but you show me what you actually do, and the world will tell you if you're grinding, right? And is it, I mean, there's another voice that do we listen to? Do we care what the world thinks? We shouldn't, but I also think that if someone on your team thinks they're killing it and they're grinding and they're working, but they're not, don't you have an obligation to tell them? Or guide them to what they should be doing? I think there's a story my brother told me many years ago about leaders in construction. My brother's a construction worker. He's been a construction worker for over 20 years. I think it's like 25 years now, and he works hard. Every once in a while, when we have time, I show the team like a clip of my brother working, and I'm like, he does that all day. And when I say all day, I'm talking 5:30 in the morning till 5:30 in the evening, and then he takes a ferry for an hour and then a 2-hour car ride home. Like he works. He's a worker. He doesn't complain. So the story is, you have the head of the job and you have the foreman, and the foreman is looking at these guys in the street. You probably heard this story. They're digging a big hole. They're digging a big hole in the street, and they're making progress. They're digging a deep, big hole. And the foreman's like, you guys are doing a great job. Way to go. And the head of the project comes over and goes, what are you guys doing? And he says, what do you mean? We're digging this hole. Look at all the progress we've made. He goes, dude, you're on the wrong street. And the foreman looks over at the head of the project and goes, yeah, but don't tell them they're making progress. Meaning, if someone thinks that they're doing well, but they're not, you should tell them. And we know what doing well means. If your goal is as compensation financially, you have to be productive. If your goal is building a client roster and you have one in 3 months, there's a better way to do it. So I think it's important that people, stop talking about locking in and grind culture and I got grit. And I'm like, we have different definitions of what that means, right? If I ask you what grit is, you're probably going to say in some way, shape, or form, it's getting it done by any means necessary and figuring out, regardless of the scenarios and circumstances, something, right? But if my definition of grit is I like the word and I like to post about it, but I don't have a lot of action, that's going to be a problem, right? That's going to be a problem if you're trying to get things done and trying to accomplish things and check boxes. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling, but
You remind me a lot of, well, the same time I met you, I met my good friend Don Saladino, who's been on a bunch of times. And I'm pretty sure we've talked about this story in the past, but Don was a gym owner in Manhattan. And again, the early train rides, the 5 a.m. stuff, going to train clients. And I think a lot of the stories we hear, successful people in our space, we're hearing them told backwards. You're starting with the end, right? Survivorship bias. And then you're hearing the story that while it was occurring, these people weren't telling the story. They weren't hyping the story. They were head down doing whatever was necessary. Don will frequently tell the story about in 2008, 2009 in New York, Manhattan, Lehman Brothers went under this big financial crisis, and how he personally guaranteed out $1 million worth of personal training to his clientele in order to get, a bit of extra money to make sure he didn't have to lay off any staff or close his facility. And worked through it, personally guaranteed it, personally did it. Personal training costs a lot more in Manhattan than it does in most of the rest of the world. But this, Don is telling the story after the fact. And yeah, sure, there's an element of, well, he was the guy through character, and I'm sure there was some luck and fortune and all that stuff where he ultimately was very successful. But again, this wasn't, I didn't know him at the time, but there's no hint to me that he ever waved this stuff around on his media. This is a little pre-Instagram and TikTok. But no, and Don's not the sort of guy who would have been right in the middle of it, worried about letting the world see what he was doing. Right. He put his head down and got it done. And I think we know a lot of people like that, a lot of the success stories of the industry. Your story, your football career, the early days of your personal training and even founding Anatomy. we're hearing the stories of what you did now, but I don't get any sense that there was any performance while it was ongoing.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that a lot of the majority of the stories that we hear are told backwards. They were lived uh, forward, but we hear them, and it was like that's a great story. But it's very obvious that because of the instant gratification culture, it's let me post about this and let me posture like I'm doing these grand things. And I sent something to a buddy yesterday. There was a woman in Miami who was a luxury realtor, crushing it, beautiful woman, the best clothes, the best car, Bentley on private planes, selling, doing all these things. Meanwhile, and by the way, I'm not knocking it, but I'm highlighting the fact that she was posturing as doing these unbelievable things in Miami. She got like I think $800,000 or more in COVID loans. Like she fraudulently got them, the PPP loans, and was living this lifestyle. The FBI caught up with her, and she wrote the judge a 30-page apology, and she said, everyone's doing it, and I thought it was okay, and I'm sorry. And the judge obviously sentenced her to like 41 months, but I think there's a culture, it's real, the culture that they're more interested in appearing successful than actually being successful in, whatever your definition of maybe their definition of success. I think it actually is more about appearance than actually doing things. And that's one of the challenges because when they look at a person who does have the private plane, who does have the homes, I'm like, you're looking at 50 years of work, but they just had their head down. Like when I'm running sprints and doing drills on a field at 5 a.m. in the cold of Massachusetts in December, I didn't have a phone. I didn't tell anyone about it because I didn't want people to try to talk me out of doing it in the cold and in the early morning hours. I said, I'm gonna keep it to myself, right? Because people might look at me like I'm crazy. Nowadays, everyone's like, look at what I'm doing, look at what I'm doing, look at what I'm doing. Clearly, we know the science behind it. You're doing it for a dopamine hit. But if you're if you really care about it and you really want to do it, then why would you tell anyone? I know a guy he's won High Rocks every time he entered it. He's never posted about it. And people are like, who is this guy that keeps showing up wearing the cowboy hat? He's like, he's former military guy. He's like, if I show up, I'm gonna win. He doesn't even put the story up. He doesn't care. Say, I did it for me.
Oh, I'm fascinated. You said everybody is doing it. Her justification. And then I think about you at those, early mornings in cold Massachusetts, the people you were surrounded by, coach and the teammates, what have you. And I mean, maybe not everybody was doing literally what you were doing, but everybody was doing something that was along the lines of what you did. It speaks to the people that I mean, it's the old proverb, you're the product of the five people closest to you, but it's who are you surrounding yourself with and what media are you following? Because I think now that's just as critical. But if her justification was everybody else is doing it, well, that tells me what kind of communities is she locked into. I always warn people about chasing status, performative status via media, expensive, anything, waving it around. And I know people, I don't, not only, they're not necessarily bad people, but they're caught in this. They have this idea that they're of high status, but they don't have the financial means to live the status that they want to show the world. And then they take those shortcuts. So, more thoughts on curating, because you're very clear on the whole, like, hey, stop listening to podcasts if you're not acting on it. But curating,
You're doing a great job advertising this thing.
my sponsors are going to be pissed now that they're all good. If anything, I want people to go over and dive into your podcast too from this because, I hope people are picking up on the humble and very measured way, thoughtful way that you speak about anything that you're saying. So, but your thoughts on how to curate both the people around you, but also the media you're consuming.
Um, So, I think if you, I think you have to start with understanding about understanding and figuring out exactly what you want, or at the very least, what direction you want to go in. You don't have to have all the answers. I just hired a young man who's 20 years old at our Miami Beach location. I'm thinking he knows he wants to be a trainer. He knows he wants to make a name for himself. Does that mean he wants to be a trainer for the next 20 years? I don't think he needs to say that. I don't even think he needs to know that right now. But he knows right now, I want to be a trainer. I want to be good at it, and I'm going to give my best. That's a start. I think so. People have to, think about what they want to do. And then, he's a trainer, and then that could take him to maybe working for a team, maybe owning a business, running his own thing, whatever it is. But I think you have to commit to something, anything, and be good at it. I think what happens is like someone gets a job, they tell during the interview everything they want to hear. And then once they get there, they're like, I'm really not that passionate about this. So that's why it's okay for me to be a little bit late sometimes. And I'm going to take a few days off. And I'm really not going to give my best, because what's going to happen is when I find out or figure out what I want to do, I'm going to be really good at that.
Mm.
It's, I'm not really worried about right now. And I feel like saying you are building habits that you will not be able to unbake for the rest of your life. So whatever you do, you should say, I am going to attack this. I'm going to bring enthusiasm. I'm going to be punctual. I am going to put the work in. I'm going to put the effort in. And regardless if I want to be in this the next 5 years, I'm in it now and I want to be the best at it. But people don't approach it that way. They're like, this is kind of something that I'm doing right now. I'm trying to figure it out. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with trying to figure it out, but there is something wrong bullshitting yourself, saying that because I'm trying to figure it out, I can give a mediocre effort.
A quick break from this episode to shout out RP Strength and the RP Hypertrophy app. I have a big confession. I've never used a coach before. I've always auto-regulated my training for decades. But I've known Dr. Mike Israetel and Nick Shaw, the founders of RP, for years, and I'll get behind anything they create, including years of reading their books, consuming their media, attending their seminars, and having them as guests on the show. And I've been using the RP Hypertrophy app now for several months. And several things have happened. It forced me to make smaller and more gradual but better increases in weight volume across time, like putting 5-pound plates on each side of a leg press. Like, who does that? Never before. Only 45s. It cut out the junk volume. It made my workouts faster and more efficient. I show up with a plan. I didn't have to think about what to do. I feel more accountable having to log my progress. And I don't skip things because I don't feel like it. If hiring a one-on-one coach isn't for you, using the RP Hypertrophy app is the next best thing to manage your gains and to take the guesswork out of your program. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free, and if you don't like it, they'll give you your money back. I've also got you a $50 US dollar discount, so go to rpstrength.com/coats and use the code COATSRP, or go to the link below in the show notes. That's rpstrength.com/coats and use the code COATSRP. There's something really good here. So have you ever read Seth Godin's book, Linchpin?
Of course.
So there's a story he tells in it, and this book is literally about what you're talking about. And if I recall correctly, it tells a story about two baristas. And this could really just be someone. Think about the people that you encounter when you go into, any business that you patronize. Mm-hmm. And you get, again, two types of baristas. So let's say one is high energy, positive, enthusiastic. And that person tends to, it gets your name right, often will remember your name, is cheerful. And then there's the person who you can tell they don't really want to be there. They, in the amount of effort they feel they're being paid for. So they begrudgingly do it all. 6 months from now, which of those two people do you think is still going to be working there? It's a trick question. Mm-hmm. It's, go ahead, you answer it.
I know the answer. I know the story well.
It's the person who begrudges the work, because the person with the cheerful, positive attitude who goes above and beyond, someone comes along and, you're a business owner. I bet you yourself, you've encountered service people and you think, hey, here's my card. Have you ever considered this? Come work with me, because it's hard to train that kind of personality. You can train the skills. right? You can learn to be a trainer. You can learn to do all this stuff when it comes to some sort of operational thing with a gym. But if you find that kind of personality, and those people invariably get opportunities, and it's exactly what you said. It's you're setting your baseline. I remember I used to work in a casino as a poker dealer, poker room supervisor,
Mhm.
and I would remember people's names. And I would still occasionally see someone 15, 16 years, 18 years later and remember a name, but they remembered me. I took pride and passion in the work, even though it wasn't the greatest work all the time, some tough hour shift work, but I definitely cared about going over and above. And I got pressure from other managers and dealers because I would go above the sort of union shop mentality in terms of the effort, right? And there was some resentment and often negativity. But then years later, I to this day have clients who personally train with me who were players that I dealt poker to. Lots of people are friends from that world. And when I read the book, I'm like, it wasn't like I read the book and decided, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I read the book long after the fact. And I went, wow, that actually explains how I approached my
No,
work.
1,000,000%. I mean, listen, I try to, I don't, this is what I say, Andrew. I'm not giving people answers, solutions, or tell people what to do or give you a list on how to be better. I don't do any of those things, but the people who I kind of identify that they really want to be better, and I can see that through their effort. Sometimes I'll say, hey, just give this some thought. Think about this. And, my whole life was, I said this in a podcast a few months ago. When I finished football, I had to start from zero. And by the way, if someone comes to Miami and they want to be a realtor, they have to start from zero. I'm not the only one who had to start from zero. I think what I'm saying is because I was playing on this big stage and I felt like I had a larger in life uh, experience, and then I had to kind of go down to a fresh start, getting paid minimum wage. It humbled me very much. But what I would tell people who are starting, where am I going to go? If I wanted to be a realtor, I start at the bottom. If I wanted to be a news person, I start at the bottom. If I wanted to be a sports anchor, I start at the bottom. Probably getting coffee for people. You're starting at the bottom. So knowing that you're going to start in the bottom, like I'm not, if you have a wealthy family, you may be able to start life off on third base. And I have a friend that always says, but that doesn't mean you hit a triple to get there. I wasn't that person. I'm not hitting a triple. I'm at home plate, and that's where I'm starting. I'm not going there because I have to start somewhere. I might as well make the best of it, give great effort, and I'm going to build a community. So when people ask, at least with the people that I know that I've kind of merged into what we do today, like I never wanted to like have like a gym. I wanted to develop a community of people around me who I loved, respected, and could help. And I'm like, you know what? These are great people. Ironically, they're still a part of my life and they're members of Anatomy. But the intention wasn't, let's try to build this, we get a business going like that. It's not my intention. It never really was. It was, let's develop positive reputation and be there for people when you're needed, impact some lives. And then maybe that's a community and foundation that we could stand on to do other things. But the other things happen 20 years later.
Marc Megna, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody can follow you at Marc Megna. You're one of those, I always love this. People actually got your own name without having to add any bullshit to it like I did. But it's M-A-R-C, M-A-R-C-M-E-G-N-A. What's your podcast called?
The Megna Method.
The Megna Method. Is there anything else you want to direct people to?
Yeah, absolutely. If people are interested, my dear friend Randy West made a great documentary. Yes, the documentary is about my journey from Fall River to the NFL. It's called Just the Kid from Fall River. It's on Amazon. It's on iTunes. You can check it out if you like sports documentaries. But the documentary was made for at-risk youth to understand that if you put some work in, things are going to go in a positive direction. So it's a sports documentary. If you enjoy those things, please check it out. Just a Kid from Fall River by Randy
And the
West of my
and the book.
Dream Big Never Quit, Amazon, and the audiobook on Audible, which by the way, have you done an audiobook? I'm sure you have.
So I've listened to yours on audio is how I did it. Yeah.
You a very irritating experience to say the least. In that booth, you don't say, I remember the guy helping me recording said, yeah, we'll just knock it out in a couple weekends. Turned into like 7 months. Saturday at like 3 p.m. to the evening, Sunday. And I was thinking, what am I doing in this booth? But when you record a sentence, you have to record that sentence like 15 times. One sentence. And what's this? I know we have to go here. What is your plan for your podcast in the next few years? Because you've grown so much and you've done a great job. I'm serious. You've done a great job, and I've watched it, and I think you've done something really special. So, what is your plan for the next few years?
Everybody listening, take a note of what Mark just did. He flipped it back around, and notice how much he uses my name. That's little traits like that are why people like you and want to work with you. With podcast, I mean, this is over 8 years and over 400 episodes. Never imagined having sponsors. Big shout out to all my amazing sponsors. I hope you guys will go and follow them and check out what they're doing. Um, I have to say this, despite the fact that I now have 6 pretty incredible sponsors, and not each one shows up on each episode. I use and endorse and love every one of them. Okay. So this is not just, hey, someone rolls up and says, hey, here's some money. Like I do get a fair bit of that. I'm like, no, I'm not interested. This is not something I would get behind. I have no illusions about setting up a studio and then having everything in person and all of a sudden becoming Modern Wisdom or Joe Rogan or Mel Robbins or any of this sort of stuff, right? They probably didn't either. I think Chris Williamson is one of the more fun journeys to follow.
Right.
I'm still a full-time in-person personal trainer. That is still what I love. It's still what I do. I think that's kind of rare. I think people think they're supposed to graduate or scale out of it. This is more speaking to the coaches. Um, I'm working on something and see if I can get it together that will help in-person personal trainers. But the podcast is selfishly still is and always has been. I get an hour of quality time with people I really like and enjoy, friends who I haven't got to see in a while, because I haven't seen you in person since 2021 when you spoke at Figure Summit in Seattle. And again, I can turn around and share these conversations with everybody else. I want to get better at asking great questions and facilitating conversation that people plug into. I've been lucky to get, some incredible guests if anybody's listening. And I managed to get JP Tremblay, Julian from the Trailer Park Boys. So for some of you guys, that's a big deal. Some of you guys might not know who he is, but Canadian comedy television icon, right? And just loves my media. Or icons of our industry like Joe DeFranco or Brad Schoenfeld or, any other number of great people. So that's the best part. And maybe I think there's wisdom in having big goals. I've been digging into some of, God, what's this shit? There's an author. He's all about scaling. Oh goodness. He wrote a bunch of books with Dan Sullivan. So it's slipping my mind right now. But I think there is some wisdom in kind of shooting the moon. I think that's great. Having really, really bold ambitions and then questioning the assumptions about why things would take so long. But at the same time, I think there's also something equally valid in showing up, doing the little thing, picking up a piece of paper off the floor, metaphorically every single day. And sometimes some really cool outsized opportunities arise because of that. So I'll never set any limits on it. But for me, I'm reading through Atomic Habits again. And it's about your systems. It's showing up. It's not about goals. It's about systems. It's the next episode, make sure I prepare, make sure there's something I find fulfilling and enjoy. So that's me. So guys, go follow Mark. Appreciate it.
I appreciate your insight and thoughts and answer. Keep crushing it. And thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you, my friend.